I hate unexpected phone calls. I don't like Mondays. Usually I'm in a good mood after the weekend, and the dull routine of paperwork seems so dreary. My wife, Kate, called during lunch to find out when I'd be home. She was planning to go shopping and wanted to be home when I arrived. Then the phone rang at 2 in the afternoon, just as I was putting the finishing touches on the client database. I tried to hang up and repeat the last few keystrokes. "Hello, Dave Marshall?" No response, just a lot of background noise and a few muffled voices. "Hello, Dave Marshall?" Still nothing. I almost hung up, thinking it was just kids making prank calls. Then I realized it was my wife.
Welcome to the Dark Side channel. Dive into the world of human relationships, mistakes, and right decisions. Don't miss out. Subscribe and join our growing community.
Kate. Kate often accidentally butt dials on her phone. I wouldn't mind $1 for every time she did. Realizing who it was, I decided to eavesdrop on her shopping trip. My birthday was coming up, and I might get some idea of what she wanted to get me. It turned out to be one of my worst decisions that day. Don't worry. My husband's at work, and I don't need to be home until 5. We have 2 hours. That's very nice. Don't stop. It was Kate's voice, of course. It wasn't a shopping trip. The rustle of clothing and sounds continued for a few minutes. I don't know how long. I was in shock. I knew it was a guy from the grunting he made in response to what Kate was doing to him. I strained to hear what was happening. Part of me didn't believe it. There had to be a simple explanation. Another, more logical part of my brain told me it was true, that she was cheating on me. I didn't recognize the male voice, so I was almost certain it wasn't one of our friends. So who was it? Why was she cheating on me on us? A burst of Kate's laughter brought me back to the phone call. "Oh, you're in a hurry!" The phone easily picked up the sound of lips smacking. "Babe, you're the best." I knew what he meant. Kate enjoyed the pleasure she could give me. She also enjoyed the power it gave her over me. Now she was doing it to someone else. Some guys might like that, but not me. It tore me apart inside. Louder than usual, the grunting on the phone drew my attention back to what was happening there. Several minutes of silence passed as I imagined what was happening on the other end of the phone call. Soon, too soon, I heard her resume her magic, and the sounds resumed. That final grunt signaled the end. Then their conversations repeatedly tore me apart. The squeak of springs, the sound of their kisses. All those sounds, they hit me hard. I wanted to reach out to the phone and strangle them both. Kate always enjoys the aftermath. Judging by the silence, that's how it was this time. As the insane sounds of my wife and her lover echoed through the phone lines, I finally lost control. I couldn't bear it anymore and hurled the phone against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, like confetti, scattered across the furniture and floor. For the next hour, I sat there in miserable despair, tears streaming down my cheeks. I buried my head in my hands and cried for what I had lost. How could she do this? She never said she was unhappy with our life. How long had she been doing this? My marriage was shattered. She wanted someone else, and I could never share her. I loved her too much for that. I would never be a cuckold. I felt humiliated as a man and as a lover. Her comments made me feel inadequate, and it enraged me even more. I decided I would go home, talk to her about it, then pack my bag and leave. Thank goodness we didn't have children. We hadn't been married long enough to accumulate a lot of stuff, so packing wouldn't be difficult. The house was rented, and most of the furniture belonged to her anyway. My heart was broken over what I had lost, but I knew I had to be strong to face it. I gathered myself up, then began to clear my desk, preparing to leave. Just as I was about to pick up my briefcase, my secretary knocked and entered. She stopped and stared at me with my red, swollen eyes. Surveying the room, her gaze settled on the shattered phone. Concern and care flashed across her face before she continued with what she came for. "Dave, are you okay? Can I get you anything?" Shaking my head, I whispered, "No, I'm fine. I'm leaving a bit early today. I have some personal matters to attend to." "Okay. Before you go, talk to your wife on the phone in my office. She couldn't reach you on your personal line." She glanced again at the broken phone, scattered into tiny pieces on the red carpet. My wife. I don't want to talk to her. My voice raised 2 levels as my anger surfaced. Tell her I'll see her later. The poor woman looked as though she'd swallowed something unpleasant, pondering my angry response. I'm sorry, she said you'd say that, but I have to convey it's urgent, and if you don't answer the call, don't bother coming home. She demanded I talk to her. Well, I'll talk, but on my terms. I'll let her know soon enough that she'll be the one in hot water, not me. Brushing past my secretary, I grabbed her phone and pressed the flashing red button on the second line. What the hell is this? Dave, just calm down and listen and I'll explain everything. My anger was uncontrollable, but I thought I'd give her enough rope to hang herself, then let her know I'd heard it all. Fine, explain. Oh, so that's how it was. Now I know you're angry, but you hung up a bit sooner than I expected. I thought you'd try to record what I was doing to listen to later. Well, never mind. I cut her off. You knew I was listening? You did this knowing I could hear what was going on? Well, of course I knew after all. I dialed the number and waited for you to answer before we started. Now I know it's confusing, so let me clarify the situation. First of all, I know about your little fling with Debbie, and I know it's over. It was just to let you know that 2 can play at that game. Now you understand the pain I felt when I found out. I was stunned. She knew about me and Debbie. How could she? It had only been a month, 5 secret meetings. The guilt was overwhelming, so I ended it. How could she know about that? I didn't tell anyone. Debbie, it had to be her doing. Debbie was upset that I broke it off with her. Did she tell Kate? That was the only plausible explanation I could come up with. Dave? Dave? Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. My anger subsided a bit, and my voice almost returned to normal. Who is that guy you slept with? How did you know about Debbie? Why didn't you just tell me? Not in that order. First, Debbie got a little angry about you dumping her and called me, telling me all the juicy details. I'm sure she exaggerated a bit, but there was enough for me to know you had an affair. Why didn't I tell you? Well, I thought the method I chose was more weighty. I wanted you to know that pain can be 2-sided. Kate paused before continuing. As for who he was, you'll never know. That's part of your punishment. And you won't know if I really cheated, and if so, with whom. What do you mean, did I really cheat? I heard you 2 doing it. I heard you telling him how much better he was than me. Yeah, you did hear something, but did it really happen? Or did I just stage it to make you think I did? Sure, there was a guy, but did I let him, or was it all an act? You have to ask yourself, do you think I'd really cheat on you? Just like I had to ask myself about you. Again, it's part of the punishment. I'll never tell you what really happened. You'll just have to come to terms with it, just like I have to come to terms with what you did. I didn't know what to say. I knew I heard everything. Now she was telling me that maybe it was all just a pretense to make me think she was cheating. How do you deal with that? If I knew for sure, I could react, but not knowing really left me no choice. Kate broke into my thoughts, her voice softer this time. Dave, I never said he was a better lover than you. So was that a lie too? Or did he really do something with me that you never could? I had to think the same thing when Debbie told me about you 2. I stood there shaking my head, unsure of anything. Was any of this real? Or was it all just a bad dream? I had no answers. Dave, I love you, and I want us to stay together, but I couldn't stay with you if you really didn't understand the pain I went through. This was my way of figuring it out for myself. We'll talk about it when you get home, but for now, I have to go. I love you. She hung up before I could reply. What could I even say? Later we did talk. I explained everything I had done and why. She cried a lot, and then told me she could get through it if we both remained faithful to each other from now on. She still didn't tell me if she cheated on me or not. I begged her to tell me the truth so I could move past it, but she said now wasn't the right time. 6 months later, things were getting worse and worse. I couldn't get it out of my head, and it seemed like we were going to break up. I even refused to make love to Kate until she presented a note from her doctor saying she had no venereal diseases. At first she was offended, but I told her I wasn't taking any risks. She finally understood, and agreed. It didn't help. It wasn't the thought of her sleeping with someone else. I could handle that. It was the uncertainty that was so much worse. In the end, I moved out of the main bedroom into a spare room for some solitude. I couldn't bear to be in the same bed with her without getting angry. We hadn't been intimate since all this started. Every time the image of her with him replayed in my mind. Kate was desperate, but still didn't tell me. As a last resort, we both sought counseling. During the first session, the therapist convinced Kate that if we were to work through this, she'd have to tell me the truth. As he put it was a cruel and unfair punishment. I know it was painful for her to admit she really had been with someone else, but it gave me the closure I needed. She didn't tell me who he was, just that I didn't know him, and he hadn't met me. "Dave, if I tell you who he was, I know you'll go looking for him." "You're damn right. I'll go looking for that bastard, and when I find him, he'll regret it." What surprised me most was how guilty Kate felt about her revenge and how much pain she caused me. That more than anything else convinced me we'd eventually overcome this obstacle. We truly moved forward and stayed together, eventually returning to a more normal marriage. These days, I'm more attentive to Kate, and we spend more time together. She says it's because I don't trust her, but we both know it's because we don't want to risk losing each other. I had one ace up my sleeve Kate didn't know about. She told me I didn't know him and that he'd never met me. That gave me my first clue as to who this bastard might be. It had to be someone who knew Kate was married and knew about me but hadn't met me. I knew all her friends and she knew mine, so it wasn't one of them. My next investigation led me to her workplace. Perhaps it was someone she worked with. I had a business acquaintance who worked at the same firm as Kate, a guy I'd helped out a few times. He owed me, so I asked him to discreetly sniff out any gossip about her and another guy. 2 weeks later, he came back with an answer. George, one of the sales reps, had a reputation as a ladies' man, and he'd been hanging around Kate. Finally, she yelled at him to leave her alone, and that it would never happen again. She made a mistake but wanted to save her marriage, not start an affair. "You know, Dave, if it were anyone else, I might not have told you. But that asshole really pisses me off. He's wrecked several good marriages and couldn't care less about the pain he causes people. I knew that if I did anything, it would come back to me and Kate would never forgive herself or me. So I simmered. All this time, I kept a close eye on the bastard and waited for my chance. I took the opportunity to get back at Debbie a bit. An email to her husband detailing a mole she had, along with an embellished story of our passionate love affair, ensured she'd regret her phone call to Kate. Ironically, she never thought about the consequences of her actions, how she could lose just as much as I did. Good things come to those who wait, and it couldn't have worked out better. To make my revenge sweeter, it was the 3rd anniversary of the phone call when it finally happened. Hiding behind the hibiscus bushes lining the driveway of the lavish 2-story house, it was dark and cold. It was his last lover's house and her unsuspecting husband's. He'd had an affair with the wife of one of his firm's partners, making him vulnerable. I knew I was safe. He'd never met me, and I wore a balaclava to hide my face. The cold seeped into me. To distract myself, I went over the plan again in my head. Wait until he passes me on his way to his car parked on the street. Quickly step out and grab him by the shoulder. Turn him around, then hit him. After that, it would all depend on his reaction. I felt a crumpled piece of paper in my jacket pocket, reassuring me that everything was in order. The anger never truly left me, and the thought of that jerk reignited it. At least it kept me warm, pushing away the cold. The partner was in a late meeting and returned home to find George beaten up. A printed note pinned to his shirt told of George's affair with his wife and several other women, naming them all. I dumped all the clothes and shoes I wore into 5 different trash cans across town. George lost his job. The police had many suspects among the husbands of other women, but they never reached me. It made it to the daily papers with photos of him being loaded into the ambulance. Something like this couldn't be kept secret, and with all the publicity, his wife found out and divorced him. Kate was silent all week, but eventually she told me what happened with George. I asked her if it was the guy she got involved with, and she finally admitted that it was him. "Serves the jerk right," I said. "Too bad I didn't do it." "Well, I'm glad it wasn't you. I wouldn't want to lose you now that we've finally sorted everything out," Kate said, curling up next to me and gently kissing me on the lips. I smiled. Part of the smile was for her, and the other part was for the secret I kept. I messed up big time and paid for it. But finally, I settled the score. Now I could get on with my life. Thank you for watching the first story. We have prepared another one for you. Enjoy. They put me in a holding cell. I reckon they'll want to take my statement, but since I confessed to the crime in my first 911 call, I don't think there's much urgency. Meanwhile, I'm lying here on a hard mattress with a waterproof cover, staring at the whitewashed walls and heavy metal door with a central peephole. I'm pretty calm. Actually, relief is the best word I could use to describe my state of mind. Glad the hard part is over, and the pounding in my head has subsided. My wife's lover is a real estate agent. He deals with rentals in Leicester. His name is Bruce. He's under 30, tall, lean, and athletic, with tightly curled dark hair resembling a Persian lamb's. His eyes are dark too, and he always has a ready smile with white, even teeth. I can see he's attractive to women, and my 40-something wife was no exception. We met him together one Saturday morning. We were interested in an apartment near Holloway Royal College for our daughter, Henny, who's starting university in the fall. He promised to call their local agents and let us know. Beatrice said she would drop by after work one evening and pick up whatever he had. Well, it seems she picked up much more. I found out about their affair a couple of months later. I have no idea how long it had been going on, but one lunch break I was in Leicester, visiting a difficult client. I was walking down Charles Street and saw Beatty coming out of a shop hand in hand with him. I followed them at a distance until they entered a small bistro with curtained windows. By then, there was nothing more I could do, so I went back to work with a sinking feeling. A week later, I realized it was a full-blown affair. She gave up her Wednesday and Friday evening shifts at the Oxfam bookshop and spent them at his apartment. If I hadn't known, I would have never suspected from her behavior. Outwardly, our relationship hadn't changed. What did change was that I became hyper-aware of every nuance in behavior and language, finding it harder and harder to smile and make small talk. Beatty went to bed as usual, saying, "Don't stay up too late, and don't stomp around in the bathroom, and don't wake me up once I'm asleep. You know how hard it is for me to fall back asleep." I sat and pondered. I had to make a decision. Can I just walk away from the wreckage of my marriage? Well, to some extent, yes. I'm the stereotype of subtle villainy, a tax inspector, and though I live in my hometown Leicester, I work in tax inspection in Nottingham. The train ride takes 30 minutes, and I find train time always beneficial. It would be all too easy to find an apartment in Nottingham or its surroundings and shake the dust off my feet. But why the hell should I? Can I just carry on as is and move into a rental? No, not in a million years. In the week since I discovered this affair, I've realized I'm seething with anger. Yes, this man suffers more from a bruised ego than a broken heart. How could she do this to me? Should I confront her? Maybe I could get some balm for my wounds by venting my pain and humiliation to her. No, not my style at all. All my working life, I've trained myself to be a spider, waiting for flies to get caught in the web. I read, listen, compare, analyze, find weaknesses. Plus, after 20 years dealing with tax evaders, fraudsters, embezzlers, and forgers, listening to their feeble attempts at self-justification, I've developed a kind of reluctant respect for defiance and a genuine contempt for people who commit crimes and then grovel when caught. If she said, "Sod off, since when do you care what I do?" it would be hard not to understand her, so no confrontation with her. What about the curly-haired bloke? Maybe a meeting with him would be possible. Can I scare him off? Maybe not. He knew she was married from the get-go. It's no coincidence. No, it's no coincidence that he's screwing her several months later. I doubt the grieving husband and father fazed him. How angry was I? How vengeful? Not as much at the moment as later. I was numb, as if in a barbiturate haze. As the night wore on, my mind spun pointless circles like sand in a wheel, my anger growing and growing. I don't claim to be the world's best husband. Maybe I lacked a bit of passion, but Beatty's no better. It was her who decided that lovemaking twice a week was excessive for a couple with a teenage kid, and once or twice a month was more age-appropriate. She started wearing a long flannel nightshirt after decades of sleeping naked and nagged at me until I became uncomfortable in my pajamas. The thought made me sit up straight in my chair. She'd weaned me off lovemaking for a couple of years, and now I find out she's got a lover. She really pulled the wool over my eyes, the cheating bastard. Rage consumed me. 3 in the morning gave way to 4, and I was still stoking the flames of anger. I was going to confront him not in civilized daylight, but in the hour before dawn, a favorite time for the Gestapo and the KGB. And I wasn't going to go empty-handed. My brother recently gave me a Walther pistol, which our father took from an SS officer in the last month of the war, along with a dozen 9mm rounds. Just the thing to scare those curly locks. At this time of night and in such a mood, it all sounded so reasonable. I put on my jacket and shoes, grabbed the car keys, and went down to the garden shed where the pistol was hidden. I tucked it into my jacket pocket, leaving the bullets in the drawer. After all, I just wanted to scare him. 10 minutes later, I was approaching his apartment through the laundromat. I rang the bell and immediately started pounding on the door. A minute later, he stood before me, hair tousled from sleep and eyes bewildered, dressed in a tank top and boxers. I could see the lower half of a slender girl, clad only in lingerie, standing on the stairs above him. It was the final humiliation. "You bastard!" I yelled. "Why are you sleeping with my wife? You can find plenty of chicks your own age, you're just scum." He started to shut the door, but I pulled the gun from my pocket and brandished it. I sharply pulled back the cocking mechanism to make it look more intimidating. His eyes widened, and he looked frightened. At any moment, I thought, the police would arrive and arrest me, and then Beatrice and everyone else would see how my life had been poisoned. I grasped the gun tightly, and then, to my horror, I fired. I was filled with bile, and he fell backward. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed 911. "Emergency services, what service do you require?" "Police and an ambulance, please. I just shot someone. I think he's dying. Address is 311A Narborough Road. Please, hurry." A minute later, I repeated my statement to the police dispatcher, and I was told to wait for the squad car to arrive. I placed the gun on the linoleum floor and futilely tried to stuff a handkerchief into the wound, but it was clear that nothing would help. So here I am in this cell, waiting for the police officers to interrogate me. One thing I am certain of. Nothing in this world will make me admit that this was all accidental, and that I didn't know there was a bullet in the chamber. A man has his pride,